Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive here on the Unseen Wisdom. We love to dig into the sources you send, and today we're taking a look at a story that's got a lot of layers and a lot of twists and turns. It's the case of Sean Diddy Combs. I think a lot of people know him.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
As a music mogul.
Icon.
Yeah, a cultural icon, the embodiment of hip-hop success. I mean, he's been around for decades and kind of represents that, that whole...
the epitome of it.
That whole genre. But the information that you've sent paints a much different picture.
Yeah.
A much darker side to this story. One that's filled with serious allegations and a legal battle that, I mean, this could have some far-reaching consequences for the music industry.
It's really interesting because you have this, very carefully crafted public image, right? The extravagant parties, the business ventures, just this aura of invincibility. And then juxtapose that with these very serious accusations and charges that he's facing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not just the charges themselves, right? Yeah. It's not just the, racketeering conspiracy, the sex trafficking, the transportation to engage in prostitution.
Right.
It's the mountain of evidence.
It is.
That the prosecution says that they have, 96 electronic devices were seized. Some with terabytes of data that could potentially contain, text messages, emails, videos. I mean, just
a digital trail.
A digital trail of Diddy's alleged actions.
Well, and this case, I think, really highlights, the growing role of digital evidence in trials today.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, for sure.
On one hand, it's a wealth of information and it can really, corroborate or refute certain claims, but it's also very complex, time consuming to analyze. And there's a lot of room for manipulation and misinterpretation.
Right.
So, it'll be very interesting to see how Combs' defense team navigates this massive amount of digital data.
Especially considering that with all this evidence, they're aiming for a trial in May 2025.
Right.
I mean,
it's a long way off.
That's a ways away.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what's the legal strategy here? What are they trying to do?
It could be a number of things. One common tactic is just delay.
Sure.
Hoping that, witness testimony becomes less reliable, public interest wanes, or, maybe they're just meticulously going through all this evidence, hoping to find some discrepancies or inconsistencies that they can, exploit to their advantage. The fact that 3 different federal judges have denied him bail does suggest that the prosecution has a pretty strong case.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
It is.
Denying bail is not something that judges, take lightly.
No.
They only do that if they really believe that a defendant poses a flight risk, a danger to the community. And in Diddy's case, given the severity of the charges and, his access to private jets, the allegations of potential witness tampering, it seems like the judges had concerns on both of those fronts.
It seems so.
And speaking of witness tampering, those allegations are...
troubling?
They're really troubling.
Yeah.
There are reports suggesting that Diddy's family has been pretty vocal on social media and that they've even been trying to scrub incriminating evidence from those devices.
Yeah. Witness tampering can have very serious legal repercussions.
Yeah.
It's essentially obstructing justice, and it can really damage the defendant's case, and it can also influence the judge's decisions when it comes to bail, as we've seen here.
Right. And so, instead of enjoying his usual lavish lifestyle,
right,
Diddy's now residing at the Metropolitan Detention Center, or MDC. And from what we've heard, it's
a far cry.
Yeah, it's a far cry from the world that he's accustomed to.
His own attorney has described it as having inedible food, extreme temperatures, violence, unsanitary conditions. It's a real reality check, a stark reminder that even with all the wealth and fame that he has, it doesn't really offer much protection when you're up against the legal system.
Right. This drastic change in circumstance coupled with, the allegations really paints a different picture than what we're used to seeing of Diddy. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about him.
And it's important to remember that, we are dealing with allegations at this point, and he does maintain his innocence, and his family's been very steadfast in their support. But the sheer number of accusations, many of them going back decades, I think that's something that warrants serious consideration.
One of the sources that really stood out to me was the lawsuit filed by his former executive assistant.
Right.
And it describes these events called Wild King Nights.
Yeah.
Which
sound very similar.
To the freak-off that were mentioned in the indictment.
Exactly. And both accounts describe these elaborate parties fueled by drugs, and there's this potential coercion and sexual exploitation that's being alleged.
Yeah. And then you've got this detail about this MVP bag.
Oh, yeah.
That was allegedly used at these parties.
Right.
It reportedly contained red lights, baby oil sex toys, various drugs. I mean, it's a disturbing glimpse into a world of excess and indulgence.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I think that detail is particularly noteworthy because it raises these questions about the normalization of these behaviors within, certain segments of the entertainment industry. We all know that drug use, particularly in hip-hop culture, has been glamorized, but I think that this case potentially reveals, a darker side to that glamorization,
right,
where consent and safety may be compromised.
It's a reminder that, what might seem like harmless fun to some
right.
can have some very real and devastating consequences for others.
Absolutely. And I think this case, with all of its complexity and its disturbing allegations, really forces us to confront these uncomfortable questions about, the entertainment industry, the power dynamics, the potential for exploitation, and how those things all intersect.
Before we move on to some of the other lawsuits against Diddy, I'm just curious, what stands out to you the most about this former assistant's account?
I think what's really striking is this alleged emphasis on loyalty and this potential abuse of power. He claims that he was coerced into doing certain things as a display of loyalty. And I think that highlights, the potential for manipulation within these relationships.
Yeah.
And that theme of power dynamics, I think it comes up time and time again in the accusations against him.
That's a good observation. And it leads us to another lawsuit that dives even deeper into these disturbing allegations. A lawsuit filed by a woman under the pseudonym Jane Doe. This lawsuit and others like it raise even more questions about the potential scope of this case and the unseen wisdom that we can, uncover from these sources.
The lawsuit filed by Jane Doe is particularly disturbing, not just because of the allegations themselves, but because it brings in another figure into the narrative, Harve Pierre, the former president of Bad Boy Records.
Right. Jane Doe alleges that she was gang raped and sex trafficked by both Diddy and Pierre when she was just 17 years old. I mean, that detail about her age is it's horrifying.
Absolutely. And if true, these accusations point to a level of predatory behavior that is deeply concerning. She claims that she met Pierre in Detroit and he was bragging about how close he was with Diddy. And then later she was lured to Miami under false pretenses and subjected to this horrific abuse.
And the lawsuit also claims that Pierre introduced Jane Doe to other men who also sexually assaulted her, implying a potential network of individuals involved in this exploitation. I mean,
right.
It's a chilling thought.
It is, and this lawsuit, along with others that have been filed against Diddy, raise questions about the culture within the music industry and the potential for, power and influence to be used to silence victims.
Yeah, it's like we're peeling back the layers of this, carefully constructed facade and revealing this much darker reality underneath.
Yeah.
And Jane Doe's lawsuit isn't the only one alleging sexual assault. Another woman, Joy Dickerson-Neal, filed a lawsuit claiming that Diddy drugged and sexually assaulted her back in 1991 while she was a student at Syracuse University.
Dickerson-Neal's case is significant, I think, because it really demonstrates that long-lasting impact of trauma. She describes feeling shame and guilt, worthlessness, and all of that led to severe depression, suicidal thoughts. Her story really underscores those devastating and long-term consequences that these types of violations can have on survivors.
It's heartbreaking to hear how these alleged experiences have affected her life, and it makes you wonder how many other stories are out there untold or silenced.
Yeah.
Because of fear or disbelief.
That's a really crucial point. Power dynamics, especially in industries like music and entertainment, can make it incredibly difficult for victims to come forward.
Right.
That fear of losing career opportunities, facing public scrutiny, not being believed, it can be a very powerful deterrent.
It's a sad reality, but it's an important one to acknowledge and to create spaces where survivors feel safe and supported to come forward.
I completely agree. Now, shifting gears a little bit, there's another lawsuit that kind of adds a different dimension to this complex legal landscape. This one was filed by Rodney Lil Rod Jones Jr., a record producer who's worked with Diddy in the past.
Yeah, Lil Rod's lawsuit is a bit different because it introduces this concept of a criminal enterprise operating within Diddy's business empire.
Exactly. His 105-page federal complaint accuses Diddy and his associates of this whole range of criminal activities. We're talking sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, obstruction of justice.
Whoa, arson and kidnapping. I mean, those accusations take this case to a whole new level.
They do.
This is no longer just about alleged sexual misconduct, but potentially a pattern of systematic criminal activity.
And this ties back to what we were talking about earlier about the mountain of evidence that the prosecution claims to have. They've said that this investigation is ongoing and that a superseding indictment with additional charges is possible.
So Lil Rod's lawsuit, with its extensive allegations, could potentially provide information for the federal investigation, leading to even more serious charges against Diddy.
It's certainly a possibility, and it just underscores the gravity of the situation that Diddy is facing. You know, these aren't just isolated incidents of alleged misconduct. This is potentially a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior that's woven into his business dealings and his personal life.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
Right.
And as if things weren't complicated enough, we also have to consider the allegations against Diddy's son, Christian, who is facing a separate lawsuit accusing him of sexual assault.
Right, and that lawsuit adds another layer of complexity, bringing family dynamics into the equation. The plaintiff in that case is seeking to hold Diddy liable for his son's actions, alleging that he created an environment that fostered and enabled that behavior.
It's almost like we're watching a Shakespearean tragedy unfold, the fall from grace, the family drama, the legal battles, the accusations piling up. It's hard to believe this is all happening to someone who, for so long, seemed untouchable.
I think it's a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that even those who project an image of power and invincibility can be brought down by their actions.
This whole situation raises so many questions about accountability, the consequences of unchecked power, and the potential for exploitation within these industries.
It really compels us to look beyond the surface, to question the narratives that we're presented with, especially when it involves people with a lot of wealth and influence.
Before we wrap up our deep dive, there's one more intriguing piece of the puzzle we need to explore. It involves a close associate of Diddy's a presidential pardon and potential implications for his current legal troubles.
Yeah, this detail adds a whole layer of political intrigue to an already complex case. It involves Anthony Wolf Jones, a longtime associate of Diddy's with a past that's shrouded in controversy.
Okay, so let's talk about Anthony Wolf Jones. I mean, this isn't just some random guy, right? He's been connected to Diddy for years and was allegedly involved in a pretty serious incident back in the 90s.
Yeah, Wolf has been a controversial figure for a long time. He was allegedly involved in a fatal shooting at a party back in the 1990s, an incident that has continued to kind of follow both him and Diddy around.
And despite this controversial past, Wolf was convicted of drug charges in 2007 and sentenced to 15 years in prison. But here's where it gets really interesting. In 2021, he received a presidential pardon from Donald Trump, which allowed him to be released early.
Right, and that pardon is a significant detail because it raises questions about Diddy's influence and connections. Being able to secure a presidential pardon for someone convicted of serious federal crimes is not easy.
So you're saying this could be a sign of Diddy's ability to leverage his power and connections to potentially influence legal outcomes. Could this be a pattern we're seeing repeat itself in his current situation?
It's definitely possible, and it's something that I'm sure the prosecution and the judges overseeing this case are very aware of. It just adds another layer of complexity to this already intricate legal battle.
It's fascinating how this case keeps unfolding, revealing these hidden connections and behind-the-scenes maneuvers. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle.
Yeah.
Each new piece adds to the overall picture, but it also raises more questions.
It's a reminder that things are rarely as simple as they appear on the surface. There are often unseen forces at play, hidden agendas, power dynamics that shape events in ways that we may not fully comprehend.
It's like we're getting a glimpse into the unseen wisdom hidden within these sources, a deeper understanding of how power, influence, and perception really operate in the world.
Absolutely. And this case, with its intricate web of accusations, the legal maneuvering, the personal connections, it offers a valuable opportunity for reflection. I think it challenges us to examine our own assumptions, to question the narratives that we're presented with, and to really consider those potential consequences of unchecked power.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Allegations of sex trafficking, drug use, witness tampering, potential criminal enterprises, the role of political influence. It's been a heavy and unsettling journey, but also an incredibly enlightening one.
It's important to remember that these are still allegations and Diddy maintains his innocence, but the sheer volume and consistency of these accusations, along with the emerging details about his past and his connections, paint a picture that demands our attention and careful consideration.
So as we wrap up, what's the key takeaway, the unseen wisdom that you hope our listeners walk away with from all of this?
I think the most crucial lesson here is the importance of critical thinking. Don't just accept things at face value, especially when it comes to those in positions of power. To deeper having question the narratives, consider the potential for hidden truths.
That's a powerful message. And as we move forward, I hope this case serves as a reminder that accountability matters, regardless of your wealth, your status, or your influence. The truth, as they say, will eventually come to light.
And as we await the outcome of this complex legal battle, I think we should all strive to be more discerning consumers of information, more critical thinkers, and more vocal advocates for justice and accountability.
Well, thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the unseen wisdom surrounding the case of Sean Diddy Combs. It's been a fascinating, if unsettling, journey. We'll see you next time.